Hello, everyone. I'll wait a couple of seconds for you guys to be able to slowly trickle in. I'm sorry I'm a few minutes late, but we are here to discuss Skandar and the Unicorn Thief. Let me know when you arrive so we can start chatting together because it's much more fun to do this as an exchange. Also, if you're watching this back, hello. Thank you for giving this a little watch. I hope you guys enjoy what we are going to be talking about. I am not sure if I am alone or not. Hence why I'm going to wait just a few more seconds to see if people come in, and then I'll just start chatting away. So, hello, Sarah. I hope you are well. Thank you for joining. We're going to start this off with just like a very small non-spoiler discussion in case someone here hasn't read or heard of Skandar and wants to like watch the introduction of this live and then go pick up this fantastic series. But for me, it's obviously important that I start by mentioning what Skandar is. Skandar is the first book in a middle grade series, which I think it's just like I don't even know the name of this series. While I am not prepared, I just always call it the like Skandar series. And it is essentially a 5-book series, and I always mention that it's kind of like a blend of Harry Potter, Percy Jackson, and all of those kinds of very popular middle grade books. It is about a young boy named Skandar who lives on an island where there are unicorns, but they're not unicorns in the sense that like we picture unicorns. Some of them are wild and other people are bonded to unicorns. And it's just like an adventure. It's a chosen one adventure. If you want to hear more about it, I do have a review on my channel where I feel like a lot of people have found me from. So hello if you are from there. So that's like the little gist of what Skandar is about. And I thought we could start by mentioning what we gave Skandar as a whole. I, for one, obviously gave Skandar 5 out of 5 stars, hence why I am doing this. It would be a long series because I enjoyed this so much. So it was a 5-star for me, but I'd love to hear what it was for you, because I feel like there are many conflicting opinions on Skandar. Some people like me really love it, but I do think other people aren't as big of a fan of Skandar. Also wanted to mention that Sarah had mentioned how it would be cool to have a like chat, like a voice chat on Discord, which will be happening for the next live show, so we can all kind of voice our conversations instead of typing them out. Unfortunately, I had some stuff that I had to get to today that took way more time than anticipated, so I didn't have time to set it up, but I thought it was a great idea, so we will be doing that for next time. I'll leave all the information required in due time. Gave it a 4.75. I'm liking this. That means you enjoyed. Is there anything specific, and this can be spoilery, that made you take out the 0.25? Everybody rates differently, obviously, but I'd be curious to like hear about why we settled on this rating. I will say, I think my one gripe with Skandar, it wasn't enough to like dock any points off, was I do think the beginning is a little bit slow. I do think the pacing was a little bit off in the first like 50 pages. I think without the audiobook, it could have been a little bit harder to grab my attention, but overall for me, it was 5 stars. I'm so glad you liked it enough to order book 2. Do let me know what your overall rating was if you'd like. But I'm assuming it was positive if you decided to keep going with the series, which ultimately is the aim of the game with this readathon. I'm so excited. I feel like it needs to be like beside me, but can't really see it, but it's here. I did read the Yes, I think the audiobook is definitely a way to go. I prefer Skandar on audio, though I did like tandem reading, and that was definitely my favorite way to do things. Just because I did want to annotate and like tab and everything, but I do think the audio is way more engaging and it really puts you in like a solid atmosphere. So I really, really enjoyed my audio. It does have the feels, and I do want to get into that actually. 5 stars. Oh, that makes me so happy. Bought a copy for your friend so her daughter can enter this world. I do think it's a great middle grade, but and getting back to this, because I feel like since we're already on the topic of it, it does feel like a typical middle grade, and I think I mentioned that in my review, that Skandar I don't feel is reinventing the wheel. I feel like it took a lot of different things from popular middle grade books. Like I mentioned, Percy Jackson, I do feel like with the unicorns and like the Chosen One trope felt very like that. The idea of like the camp and having those elemental powers is kind of like Harry Potter in the sense of like the friendship group, and also kind of Avatar with all of like the water, fire, and everything. So I think it took a lot of inspiration from other works, which doesn't make it feel as unique, but I do think it spun it all together very well. Like it's nothing new, but it's nothing that hasn't been done like a million times, and I feel like it's been done so many times just because it's a classic. Like everybody loves Chosen One stories with friend groups, and like the vibes, like that's what I look for in a middle grade. I don't look necessarily to read something out of the ordinary every time. And I honestly don't really, I feel like especially with middle grade fantasy, it all kind of becomes a little bit one and the same. Even with like Nevermore, Amari, all of those big names in middle grade all kind of pull from the same recipe. But I do agree that like it's a fair enough point to remove that, because the enjoyment, like you're not reading something new, it's not entirely new, and I do think that could probably be why some people are put off from Skandar. My next fun little question is, if right now, having read book 1, you can choose one element, like which element would you guys choose to like be in? I struggle with this because I feel like I like all the elements, but I do gravitate towards water and earth. I think the 2 powers are really cool. Obviously, there's like this like 5th element that is also intriguing, but realistically, I myself, if I put myself in a character's shoes, would not choose that. But I think air or water, or what did I say? Earth or water would be my element of choice. I really think that is a really fun part of this book, and I feel like it's going to come really into play in the next 4 books, which is like one of my favorite aspects. I did not expect the elements to take such a big part of the story, which ended up being a really good surprise. Yes, and I feel like that's what makes it so interesting, is like everybody kind of fits in everywhere, and I feel like it's kind of like with Harry Potter and the Sorting Hat, where it's just like, what are you most of? And I think because this is only book 1, we might not know exactly what each element entails yet, which makes it even more exciting. Yeah. It's tricky to I think there's even a quiz online, which I feel like I should take. I'm a fake Skandar fan for not knowing. Thank you. Yes, I do too. So the next thing I kind of wanted to touch on is like the main plot of the story. I feel like again, it's not reinventing the wheel, but I wanted to kind of know your guys' opinion on like the story overall, like the plot points, the intrigue, the adventure. How like do we feel like it was well done? What did we like most? Like do you guys have a favorite part of the story? Because I think like I enjoyed the story as a whole, but my favorite parts of the story were the interactions between Skandar and his friends and Skandar and his unicorn and just the whole idea of the training camp and like them learning to hone in on their powers and like learning how to bond with their unicorn, how to work with them, learning about their different powers, just all of that kind of like teaching and learning vibes for me was definitely like my favorite part, like learning about the camp itself and the unicorns and just how everything from bonding to a unicorn to training with them and like all of that was my favorite part. I liked it even more than the intrigue of like what is happening and like everything with the weaver. I feel like that was an interesting part of the plot, but it wasn't my favorite specifically. And I will say one part of the plot, which I still to this day am like, I'm not sure how this is going to play out, is obviously how Skandar isn't supposed to be there and how he is brought there. To me, I'm like, I hope this ends up making more sense. And I'm just afraid that I'm not going to like where that plot line specifically is going to go because I feel like it's like we're setting up intrigue, but because the book went so far out and kind of brought it back in at the end, I'm like, I don't know where we are going to go off with this, and I'm not sure I'm gonna like it. So I'm afraid that like book 2 or book 3 for me is gonna kind of take a hit because of the enjoyment of that plot line specifically. But I do hope we get more of like the training and the bonding and the friendship in general because I love reading about friendships in middle grade. So I'd love to hear what your guys' favorite parts or least favorite parts of the book were concerning the plot. I feel like there's so much to choose from. And also, I'm sorry I'm making you guys type this out. I feel like next time, voice chat is definitely going to be the way to go. It's going to be so much easier. Do we even have favorite parts? I feel like sometimes we just like a book for its overall enjoyment, especially in middle grade. I feel like people don't necessarily critique middle grade the same way they would other genres, which is fair enough because I am clearly not the target audience of Skandar, but I love it. I also love Bobby. I think Bobby see I was trying to like I was going through like my tabs and stuff from Skandar today, trying to find like who my favorite like side character is because I feel like all of his friends are iconic and unique throughout the story and they kind of shine at different moments. But I do think that Bobby is probably the most iconic in my opinion. Like I feel like Bobby is the side character. Um yeah, I feel like world building is something that wasn't neglected in this world, and I feel like the eerie and the daily life, like I mentioned, are some of my favorites as well. Yeah, I do think that maybe it's gonna be a little bit stronger of a comeback in book 2. I know I read like 50 pages of book 2 last year, and I was made immediately thrown off because you guys will see there's like some things that change and some things that are included, which I feel are going in the direction of like the plot line with the Weaver, but I'm not exactly sure how. And I am curious because, like, obviously, the ending of this is kind of like a cliffhanger, I would dare call it. Um, but again, I wasn't as invested as, like, obviously, the whole plot line of, like, is Skandar going to be figured out and, like, I can't talk, the consequences of that, like, in the long term, what that will imply, because obviously there were some stakes at the end of book 1, but, like, what is truly going to happen and what is Skandar's true purpose in being here. See, I hadn't even really thought of that today, but yes, I do think that is an important plot line, and it kind of ties in into like lack of belonging because of the way he was brought there, but also lack of belonging because how different he is. And I feel like the plot line of Skandar being so different and him being like of the fifth element is also like a way to discuss how different people who have different abilities are not to be cast aside just because they are different and society has deemed them to be this specific kind of person. I feel like it touches on real life issues, but it makes it kind of fantasy, so it's a little bit obviously easier to digest. But I do think that is really well done. Yes, it's true that we are constantly reminded of how he's an outsider, and I do think it's like part of his character development, and it's also gonna obviously have to do with the plot because he's kind of like the typical chosen one who got there in a way that maybe um he wasn't supposed to. And the plot line of this in that aspect really reminds me of the Mistwick School of Musicraft, where the character kind of gets involved in these things and like goes to the school when technically she shouldn't, is kind of like a loophole around the situation. And obviously that always comes back to bite you. But to what extent, we don't really know yet. But it's true that I mean, he really does not belong in the sense that, like, he hadn't technically passed the exams. He isn't really in any group, but that doesn't mean he doesn't actually belong. And I think that's like the nuance here is really interesting, and I'm hoping it's done well in the next books. Yes, I do think friendships in middle grade is something that I adore. I think it's excuse me, one of like the best things, especially in fantasy middle grades. I feel like those friend groups of like each of them being in an element and being all together and them kind of having to work through their differences and like them being strong together, but also having their communities within their elements and all of that put together is a really interesting dynamic. Kind of like with Harry Potter and the different houses, except in this friend group, they're not all in the different, like in the same elements, which brings a different dynamic. But I do think that the core four friends are super interesting, and all their dynamics together are super interesting to read about. And I also do think the elements I feel were touched upon in book 1, but it's something I'm going to be really excited to see more of in book 2 because again, I think book 1 is obviously kind of like the setting of the first layer, like we're getting to know the world, we're getting to know the characters, and this plot is kind of introduced, but I do think the elements is something that needs to be pushed even further into book 2 because like the marketing of these books and everything that's around Skandar is very much like we're doing the elements, like the Waterstones books all have different elements, like each book is an element. And so like sure we got fire in here, but I'm just hoping that the next books really push that element plot in a different, like, the extra mile. Yes, and I feel like the shock and the buildup is something else that was used a lot in this book, and honestly, some things I just did not see coming. And usually in middle grade, I'm like, I'm not 12 years old. I can see this coming. But scenarios like this, and like just the ending of the book, and just like some of the plot devices and like what actually went down, I was also very shocked several times during this book. And I do feel like the intrigue is pretty high, even though like I don't care that much about the Weaver. I do feel like the impacts of the Weaver within this world are going to be really interesting to see unfold. And just the whole politics of the world, and the island versus non-island, and the wild unicorns versus the bonded unicorns, all of that is going to get super messy. And I feel like the structures and the politics of the world are also going to get intertwined and cause more scenarios um, of shock value. But yes, and sometimes like this book literally like gave me kind of chills. And I feel like the audio for the first book made everything more tense, and I was loving all of it. Yes, it is a little bit darker, and I think I was a little bit shocked by that, but then I sat down and looked at my shelves, and I do feel like a lot of my favorite middle grade books have darker elements. Nevermore, the third book, Hollowpox, gets kind of dark. The second Amari book gets kind of dark, and this is no exception. And I think it did a touch of darkness, like you said, a little bit better than some of the other books, which is also why I like it. But I do definitely think that Skandar is definitely like higher for like older middle grade um readers. I don't think it's necessarily for like a 9-year-old. In my opinion, I just think the themes that are explored, and the darkness, and like discussions on death, and your parents turning out to be like really shitty, mean, evil people. It was a lot. And like the dad and the sister being so depressed, I think was also like unsettling to me, because I feel like in middle grade books, either parents are kind of like in the background, or they're kind of there, but we never really touch upon like parents and mental health, at least not in a lot of the middle grade fantasy I read. And I thought that plot line specifically was also super interesting. How Skandar felt so much guilt, and how his family was so like struggling, and his dad's depression, and his inability to like care for Skandar and his sister at times was so interesting to read about. And I think that it was done well. Like we touched slightly upon mental health without going too deep into it, which I don't think would have been the ideal for this story. But I think the representation is still there, and like grappling with a parent who has one parent, I mean, grappling with one parent who just like yeeted out of your life, and the other who was depressed and struggling with mental health, was an interesting thing to add to Skandar's character. And I don't think it was just used as a plot device. Like it was thoroughly talked about, and it's something that you see throughout the book, and it made sense with the plot. Yes, they do talk about Skandar's dad, and I just can't wait to see how the dad will further be implicated in the plot. I know his sister, like I know for a fact that girl is straight up about to get messy and get into the Skandar plot line, and I don't think is going to be in a way that I'm super happy about. And that is also something that very much scares me for book 2. I have a feeling Skandar's sister is going to go balls off the wall and just not be a good person, because it's just an inkling I have. I have a feeling she's gonna get messy. She's gonna choose the wrong side, and then that's kind of where Skandar's loyalties are gonna get tested. I don't know if it's me reading too much into things, but I am Yes, it's all about jealousy here. And I think that's another thing that's really interesting that's talked about in the book, which is sibling rivalry. I don't think we see that a lot, especially in younger um targeted books. Like I feel like it's touched upon a little bit in young adult and a lot more in adult books, but it never really happens in middle grade where like siblings are jealous to the point of like stabbing you in the back at such a young age. But it's a thing, and I'm pretty sure that our main girly here is probably going to like make an alliance, and this is like we can go into predictions. I'm pretty sure she's gonna make an alliance with Skandar's mom in order to get a unicorn, and it's gonna get messy. Like I have a feeling they are going to end up working together, and Skandar's gonna have to go and like work against them, which scary but good for the plot. Which leads me to kind of question you guys, where do you think the plot is going to go, or what do we want to see in the next books that would keep the ratings high? Or like what do we not want to see in book 2? Do you guys have anything that you're like, if the book goes this way, like I'm done? Or do we have no expectations at all? Interesting. See, I hadn't even considered the fact that there could be romance. I think the only time I've seen an inkling of romance in a middle grade is with the Keeper of the Lost City series. And in that series, I thought it made sense and I thought it was nice that we have those discussions of like, I'm 12 years old and I am starting to be attracted to other people and like that people get crushes and insecurities. But I do agree that I think I'd be disappointed if we saw that in this series because I think what I want to see is a strong friend group, not necessarily romance. And that's like me saying that like I am an avid romance reader, but I do agree it doesn't have its place. And you saying that kind of like is making me rethink of this friendship group and like I'm like is there like do you see potential for a romance? Like who do you think could possibly end up together? Do tell. Yes, because I feel like if we're gonna go all out with like you're sorted into elements and your elements have this to do with this and that within the book, then like are we gonna see more of it? Because like I remember parts of Skandar had like this training with elements, and that was really, really, really cool to listen to and read and imagine. But I do think it will need to be pushed to a further level for it to make sense in the overall quest and like whatever Skandar ends up having to do with the Weaver and everything else that happens in the world. But like if it's not fleshed out more, for me, that's kind of where it's gonna get because like why make all this fuss over elements if we're just gonna like push them aside for side plots for sure. I don't know if there's anything specifically that I'm hoping for. I think I'm hoping for more of the Eerie itself in book 2. I'm hoping for more developments of the friend group. I am assuming there's also going to be um like someone in the friendship group at one point of this book is not going to be on board with the rest of them. I feel like someone's got to like betray the rest of the gang. Um so I have a feeling, like a suspicion this is eventually going to happen because like we can't have four happy friends for the span of 5 books, but I'm questioning myself as to like, are we going to see this in the next book, or is that going to be a further down the road kind of plot line? Is, that. But I do want to see more of the friend group itself, more of training, more of one-on-one time with like Skandar and his unicorn, because I loved those moments as well. Like when you can feel Skandar and his unicorn bonding, it made my heart very happy. And I was very interested in the plot line of unicorns as well. I don't think it's something I've read about dragons before, but specifically unicorns I felt was like a fun, unique twist on the whole thing. Do you guys think it was unique? Like, are we happy with the unicorn plot line, or do we like think it's not well elaborated on? Do we want more unicorns, less unicorns, more wild unicorns? I don't know. I feel like that shines through very well, and the unicorns are themselves, like they are characters. I feel like they're not just there. They are there and they are actively participating in the story. And I love how sassy and how different and how difficult they are at times. Like they don't just go along with everything and they don't contradict everything. And that kind of reminds me of the Dragon Legend series um by Katie and Kevin Sang, where the dragons are hella sassy. I feel like it's kind of the same thing with the unicorns. Yes. Why am I blanking on that unicorn's name? But yes, I agree. I think my favorite unicorn has to be Skandar's, just because of how we get to know them and how close they become. And like, I just cannot wait to see their bond further develop, especially because that unicorn is so different. And like, how are we going to handle the difference with Skandar and his friends and the unicorn and its other unicorn friends? Like, I feel like, are we going to handle it the same way for both characters? Is it not going to go the same way? I have so many questions in regards to like the relationship between unicorns, and I don't even know if we're going to see any of that, like if it's relevant at all to this story. But it is something I would love to see in book 2. Are there characters you guys disliked? Aside from like the obvious villain, I feel like I did struggle a little with Mitchell's character. It was kind of on and off for me, but I think like the character was well written in that way, because you're obviously not meant to like all of them all the time, and that makes them more real. But there's like certain points in the story where I was really like getting annoyed at some of like the decisions that were made, and I'm like, I get why you're making this decision, but like I'm also very frustrated, and I think that was well done. Like I think it was a well written character for that. Yes. And I think like she's meant to be seen as like a just straight up horrible character, but then once you get their backstory, it makes more sense why they are the way they are. And I think that's well done in this book, as well as like characters make decisions based off of what they are thought and what they think is right. And then once you get to see why they think such things, it all kind of clicks together, because at first she's just like a despicable person, like she is, and she remains a despicable person. But once you see like how she's brought up and like what she has to deal with, you're like, that's kind of why you're a shitty person. And I think that was interesting to see all in one book, because we could have been left on like sort of cliffhanger with that plot line of like, why is she such a mean person? But I agree, she is very unlikable. Very, very, very unlikable. But that also makes me question, like, do you think this book is well written? Like, what do we think of pacing, of character choices, of like the direction of the plot? Like, are we fans of how A.F. Stedman wrote the story? Because like we can love the characters and everything, but that doesn't mean we love necessarily everything about how this book was like made. I, for one, as I mentioned, struggled with, I think, like the first 50 pages, like the first 4 chapters for me were slower. I think the pacing was a little bit off, but it was nothing that like put me off of the book completely. But I will say I tried reading it one time and then I was like not super in the mood for it, put it down, and then when I picked it back up, the first 50 pages I was like, oh no, like is this not going to be for me? And then I flew through the rest of the book. And I feel like there were like happy times and sad times and funny characters and dislikable characters, and just everything to me kind of made sense in like the choices and like the devices used and just the pacing of the book. After the first 50 pages, for me, I didn't really have anything to critique, and like this being the author's debut novel, I think she did a solid job. I personally really have loved all my interactions with A.F. Stedman. I think she's a really fantastic author who takes the time for her readers. She's like reshared my stuff on her story. She's told me thank you a couple of times when I talk about her books. And like obviously each book has their flaws, but I think like for a debut novel overall, I don't have too many complaints. Yeah, the biggest flaw for me in the writing was the development of characters. Fair enough. Do you have any specific examples of things you're like that could have been better, or I don't necessarily agree with how she elaborated this or that character? Like, is there something specific you have in mind? Because I do love a solid critique of a favorite book of mine. I feel like sometimes I have my rose tinted glasses on and I don't see the issues. Really? And I'm like, what's the scene? Because I'm an emotional person and I haven't cried reading that series. But so you feel like in Nevermore, the character of if we're gonna compare it to something like Nevermore, I would say that the character development is not done in the same way for sure. Um, I think you immediately feel a lot more for Morgan than you may do for Skandar, at least in my opinion. Like the first few chapters of Nevermore instantly reeled me in, and I was like, I don't want you to die. Whereas for Skandar, I probably took a little bit more. Similarly, like if we're gonna compare this to like Percy Jackson, um, or Avatar, I feel like those bigger stories may be better written. It's hard for me to say, but I do understand where you're coming from, and I do think character development is something we're going to need to see in the next books for us to keep going with the series, because if you don't root for the characters, oh, why are you even reading? Do we have any solid predictions like what is going to be in book 2? I, for one, mentioned pretty much all the predictions I have. I don't think I know exactly where book 2 is going at this point, but I'm very excited to get back into it. See, that's interesting. I hadn't even considered that, but I do agree that there is a lot. Um, and I think I tend to have forgotten some of the side characters that weren't the main four, and yeah, I think that's a good point, and I do feel like some of like the teachers or the other people who are mentioned in their class that might even be significant later on completely kind of fallen out of my head. And they did take time away from getting to know the core set of characters. And yes, a friend group, plus 4 unicorns, plus world building, plus the Weaver, plus the myth, the lore, the functionings of the world, uh, and like just why and how are unicorns here? That in itself takes a lot of time to establish for it to make sense. So yes, I agree. That is a very good point, which I truly had never considered. But I think that might also be why the pacing was off for me a little bit in the first place, because I feel like so many things were being introduced at once. And I feel that that is making sense in my head now. This conversation has been very helpful. Because yes, this book has a lot of people. I went on the like Skandar wiki. The list of characters is very long for one first book. That's an interesting way I feel to compare books. Um, and it makes sense. Yeah. No, that's true. It wouldn't be fair because, like, obviously we're all starting from the starting lines. But I think that's why I would have a difficult time because for me, for example, if I think of Pages and Co., don't ask me what happened in the first Pages and Co. book because I read 6 of them, and at one point, like, what was book 1 and what was book 3, I could not tell you. So I think I could not accurately compare book 1, for example, of Nevermore and book 1 of Keeper of the Lost Cities and book 1 of Skandar, because to me, it gets all kind of blurred in together. And that's why I have to be careful with um, things like this. That's why I didn't start reading book 2 right away, because for me, if not, I probably would have talked about plot points of book 2 in a book 1 live, because that's just kind of like how it works. But I feel like if you can definitely do that, then it is a great and accurate way to kind of see which first book in the series is stronger than its counterparts. Did you guys have any questions or things you wanted to elaborate on? I think I asked most of my questions and talked about like the main plot points I wanted to discuss. We talked about the plot, the characters, predictions, things we liked and didn't like. I did want to touch on the pacing, which I did do. And obviously, starting into book 2, we're really going to get into the nitty gritty of things. And as I said, next time we can have a Discord with the voice chat in it, so it's much easier to take part in this conversation. But is there anything else you guys want to touch on when thinking of Skandar? Do let a girl know, because I'm down to chat some more if you guys have some more questions, concerns, things you want to just touch on before we go. Or do you feel like this summary of a first book was well and done for you guys? I feel like I've talked of the first Skandar book so many times on my channel that I'm like, I think I'm officially out of things to say. And I'm really excited to move on to book 2. Honestly, yes. When I was like in the middle of reading it, my head kind of went like, what? Because when I read middle grade books, I just am along for the ride and I don't try to guess the plot because I wouldn't enjoy myself as much, because like what is the point if there's no intrigue? But when I kind of sat back and went through a few of the scenes in Skandar from like 0 to 100, with like reflection, it makes sense. I don't think it was necessarily all out of the left field, and it like, it's oh my god. It is, I feel like, a very typical way to go, especially because we talk long and large of how Skandar's mom is, like, not here anymore and how she left them and she's not ever come back. And now Skandar just randomly gets brought to this island and just, like, all of that leading to the end, like, when you put two and two together, kind of makes sense. But when I was in the, like, thick of it, I was shocked by everything, and that's, I think I've touched on this before. I feel like I was shocked about all the plot twists in here. Yes, indeed. I think some plot twists were more well done than the others, and I think that that reveal in of itself, and, like, the whole plot line with Agatha and just her character and her storyline was indeed very intriguing, and I think was better done than the plot line with the Weaver. Though I do like the implications of, like, how the Weaver is going to be, like, the overarching, I'm assuming, mystery. So, like, I'm not displeased by that plot line, and I, like, my jaw did kind of hit the floor many times when reading this book. Um so yes, those are my thoughts on that. I feel like that was an excellent question, by the way, because I feel like, yeah, there's just, I feel like the end of Skandar got really messy and there's, like, a lot going on. Um, and yeah, I'm very excited to go into book 2. I think I might start it this week. Finally. I think my original feeling is I'm very excited for the author, and, like, obviously, yeah, it was supposed to come out next April, and it's coming out in October, and that is a significant cut in the time, but she explained very clearly that she's been working on these books for a long time, and she had, like, finished writing them, like, a lot quicker than anticipated. So I don't feel like this is a Fourth Wing Iron Flame situation where she just kind of went off the hype and rushed into writing more books because she's like, I need to like, it's a money grab right here and now. I don't perceive it this way. I genuinely think she just kind of is making this as, like, a fan service, and also she finished, like, writing the books earlier because she's also working on her project, which is her, I think, 2026 release, her first adult novel. Um, but I don't think she would have, like, pushed up her release just to kind of satisfy the people and be afraid of losing the hype, because the first Skandar book came out years ago now, and, like, she has created a fan base that would have waited until April without complaining because she is on time. Like, every April Skandar is there, and I don't see why they would have released a book so quickly if it wasn't actually done and ready to be published. So I don't think this is a Fourth Wing Iron Flame situation. At least that's what I'm telling myself. And from, like, what I've heard and how the author has been discussing it on her social media, like, it looks like this has been planned for a really long time. Like, she has gotten so many people on board, and, like, there's so many editions of these books, and, like, everybody had to know ahead of time what was happening. So I definitely don't think it was, like, a rushed decision, because she's not trying to, like, money grab a bunch of people before the hype. dies down. And I think that's something really interesting with middle grade, because the hype is never the same. I think the only books that have ever been hyped, at least of my knowledge, um, like very significantly, have been Harry Potter, Percy Jackson, and Nevermore was then a big hit. And then we can see what happened with Nevermore, that like the fourth book has been pushed back for 3 years now. And I think that is like the two sides of hype. One where the author is like rushing things to get things out to keep up with the hype, and the other is like it takes 3 times as long to get a book out. But I don't feel like middle grade has the same impact of hype waves, because one, the target audience is children. They don't do hype like we crazy nerd adults do hype. And I just don't think marketing works the same way for middle grade aged people. And as you guys know, unfortunately, here on BookTube, TikTok, Instagram, middle grade is such a small fraction of the book community that, like, what's the rush? You're not going to make any more money. Like, I really genuinely don't think. And, like, if it's not for the money, I think we're safe. Fingers crossed. Yeah, don't think she would have rushed it either. Yeah, I just don't see. Yeah, no. I was just very ecstatic because, like, it was the perfect time to, one, plan a readathon and keep yapping about my love of Skandar, and two, just, like, good for the author. And I feel like it's gonna, like, the only thing I'm questioning now is, when does book 5 release? Are we getting book 5 in a year? Or are we getting book 5 in April instead of book 4? Because then if we have to wait a year and a half between book 4 and 5, I might not be as happy. I am also happy. Last question. If you had a unicorn, what would I want to name a unicorn? Please also share your answers. What would I name my unicorn? Do I want like a really mythical name? Do I want a basic name? I'm trying to think. What would I name my unicorn? I probably think I'd go with something very cheesy and classic, like sugar plum, or like sweets related, or that, or the name of a Greek god. I think would be my way. But I'm very peculiar when it comes to like naming my actual pets, so I don't even know where my head would be at if I got to name a unicorn. But also I want to make it happy, because there's so much darkness in this world already. Like, my unicorn would be happy. Would have to do with something. See, that's smart. Naming your pet, just not really a pet, but your companion with something in your element. I like that. See, I'll try to come up with an actual answer for discussion on book 2. Yeah. I'm going to be thinking about this all evening. What a great way to end this conversation. So I hope you guys enjoyed this book. I am very happy to hear, Monica, that you liked it enough to get book 2. I obviously will be continuing on with the series. I have my little Skandar shrine here with the Waterstones exclusives of book 1, 2, and 3. The arcs of book 1 and 2. I'm still on the hunt for the arc of book 3. Like, honestly, someone give me an arc of book 4 is all I'm going to say. I should probably like try and email Simon and Schuster. They're going to be like, who are you? But I'd love an arc of book 4. And then I have my Waterstones exclusives of book 1 and 2 in paperback. So Skandar officially has its little shrine here on my shelves. And I wore red today to celebrate fire element, and I will be in blue next month to celebrate the water element. And I'm very excited. I think I'm most excited for the elements, as I said, of water and earth. So book 4 is highly anticipated. Like, I want to see all the elements in all the books. But book 4 is beautiful. The green and the yellow, like the palettes of the last 2 books, chef's kiss. So that wraps it up. I hope to see you guys next month for the discussion on book 2, which I think will be even more like spicy and interesting because we'll have a better understanding of what is happening next and what situation exactly we are in. Again, thank you so much for joining me and reading along with me. And I will be scheduling the live for the next 2 in the upcoming days, most likely tomorrow. I wanted to have it done for today, but unfortunately, as I said, time did really get away from me. So I will put all of the information for the next 2 live shows in the announcement videos description box, as well as just having the lives set up ahead of time so that you can click notify me, and I will see you for discussion on book 2. Have a great end of your evening, guys. Bye.